Hello, Michael Hay here again, and welcome to audio blog number 3. One question I received is, how do you manage to rant on in an audio blog for, 15 to 30 minutes? And I like to think I was asked this because the person who asked is interested in doing their own audio blog, which I wish all the best to them if they do. And before I answer that, it's actually really easy to do. I might point out that I also edit these for times. I have the tendency to sometimes pause for 5 or 6 seconds of like pure silence, or sometimes I'll hang on to a single word like, and really it's just a thought break. I talk much in the way I think, and I like to think that I write in the way I think. So I think there is a connection between all three. And, being a writer and actually being an author, and I can say that now even though it feels really weird because I do have a published novel, I'll say that my stock in trade is words, whether spoken or written or thought of. I don't believe that there's a big of a difference between those three for me. I speak like I think like I write, and I write like I speak. But yeah, it just comes from, well, even Stephen King said it, to quote him for a second, that a writer has to be able to, they have to read. It's just part of what they do. It's like how a hockey player practices hockey, or, a preacher practices what they preach. So a writer will practice what they know, and that is the written word. If I take a multiple intelligence test, the written word, like the linguistic component, is always really, really high, like even top marks depending on the test. So that is just what I do. It probably comes from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books that I've digested in films. See, when I look at a film, or when I watch a film rather, it's not necessarily a film to me. It's not like it's just this moving image and it's events and stuff. Yeah, I break it down into, I'm looking at a story and you can see story themes. I mean, that's probably why I tried not to take too much English in university, is because I figured it would, make my life even worse. Because I already do this naturally, is analyze and deconstruct plot lines. Like, for a long stretch there, I was watching movies and it was just like I didn't need to watch the ending because I knew exactly how it ended. And with a margin of error, I'm usually right. I mean, I'm not always right, but it takes a really good writer of a movie script for me to remain interested. So I managed to rant for so long just because it's like practice. I can get away with watching movies and saying, oh, that's just practicing my stories, though I probably shouldn't. And I keep a journal, and in my journal I found, well, I've kept it since I was about 16, and I've written in it pretty much nonstop. I mean, in times of happiness, it's kind of weird I don't write, but it's usually just in times of distress or conflict that I write. And you can see my language develop, and I worked through a lot of life problems that way. And that too obviously influenced the way I think, because I was thinking on paper. So that probably merged how I think and how I write together. And then, I mean, if you write like that and you think like that, then probably, you're gonna speak like that. So I think the vocal language for me came last, because I was always well, that's not true. I would say I was always a really silent child. My family will tell you otherwise, but when I got out in public, I was very, very silent. I just preferred to watch and listen to people because I find them interesting. And the more you listen to people, the more you see how language kind of fits together, and you absorb that. And it's not always a conscious effort. Sometimes you just learn by example, and it's a complete unconscious process. I mean, in some instances, I have tried to, spice up my spoken word or my written word, or you try, because, I mean, I've been writing and I'm like, oh, this is too plain. Like, what word can I put in there? So I'll rack my brain and come up with some archaic term which means the same. It'll feel a little weird putting it in, but then over time I try and use it more and more, and then it just becomes part of me, part of how I work. One famous example is, my brother always laughed at me for this too, because instead of saying, to, as in TOO, I would say as well. So I would like one as well, instead of I would like one too. And he'd always point out that it sounded really funny. So I, being me, would speak to him. I'd just emphasize the two. Like, can I have one? Two? Two? Do you want me to see, two? And, well, it kind of stood out in my memory. So I think I use, like, as well rather than two more often than not. I mean, there are just some instances where two says it all, but I think as well works. But yes, when I also make an audio blog, I probably cut out 25% of it because it's just misused words, or I'll start to say something, I'll stop and I'll repeat myself, or those annoying long pauses like that one. That was an example of what happens when I'm thinking. That wasn't scripted or anything, that just actually happened. But I thought I'd point it out, and I won't clip it out. I mean, I do edit, which takes care of a lot of the unscriptedness of this. But if I had a script and kept to it, spoke it a few times, sort of like a speech, I could probably have it right down. So it just seemed to flow natural. At least I think so anyway. I mean, I'm kind of new to the whole author thing, but I think, at least what observations I've made, is that the successful authors have a presence, or rather, like a written and spoken presence. Some people would say unique voice, but I'll just use presence. Like Stephen King kind of has a whole kind of creepy vibe about him. That's probably just comes from his writing. He's probably the nicest guy in real life, and if you listen to his audiobook, he's actually kind of, he is really entertaining, and kind of a down-to-earth guy, except for what he writes about. Yes, I think all the famous authors kind of have this presence. I mean, whether it comes from what they write or comes from how they are in real life. So the way I think of it is you're always just on stage. I mean, it's kind of like, well, it's being a celebrity. You're always on stage, even when you're off stage. It's a whole popularity game and image game and a whole bunch of other things that I totally don't understand at all. But at least I'm aware that it's there. I'm trying to learn it. Yeah, decoding these types of things is kind of just my hobby, which once upon a time was why I was silent, because I tried to watch people and figure out why they did the things they did. And one time, so this is an example of how I used to be. One time in public school, elementary school rather, this girl was passing notes back and forth with her friends, and I was kind of listening to how they talk and all that, and I forged like a note. Like I got a hold of one or two of them, and I saw kind of how they're writing, and I just chose a color pen and would try and print like they would, and I actually fooled them. Like I got them to cross their messages, like cross signals. They couldn't figure out what the other person was saying because they'd say one thing and then they'd contradict themselves. And anyway, it was just me, mimicking their language. And that is really weird. Like looking back, that's not normal behavior, I would say. But for me, it was basically a writing exercise. That's how I was viewing it. I was trying to figure out how they thought and through their language. So, yeah, what writer isn't a little weird or has some strange beginnings? And I'll tell you, my journal is a lot stranger than this. But sometimes I wonder if other people have these thoughts too, and they just are too polite to say them. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if some people just have some really strange thoughts. Like I had somebody tell me once that that during like formal dinners and that, their kind of joke to themselves was they wonder what people's reaction would be if they all of a sudden this person got up and on the table and just started like kicking stuff off and screaming incoherently. And that's what they always think. Like that's what they thought at like weddings and funerals or graduations and all that. They just said like they couldn't stop having that thought. That's just every time people are dressed up in a formal type situation, that's just what they always imagined doing. So even I thought that was a little weird, but I got what they were saying, and it wasn't so much the act itself, it's just watching what people's reaction would be to it, because those reactions, I mean, you can study people's reactions and learn a lot about them. So that was the point they had to make about that, and we'll leave it at that. And I'd also like to point out that until very recently, education was that very old Socratic method, which is, the teacher's the knowledgeable one and in charge, and they usually just stand in front of the class and kind of lecture, and the students, listen to it and kind of nod their heads and take down notes, and one or two might offer, questions or raise their hands for answers. They're getting away from that whole thing now. Not entirely, but I mean, it's still present in like university lectures and that. So, being brought up in that type of schooling situation. It wasn't for everybody, but it seemed to work for me. So I learned a lot from watching my teachers and watching how they spoke. And it was kind of funny because I remember the student who I was talking to, I won't mention their name, but it was somebody I went to school with. And she was asking, like, I can't even remember what it was for, but she's like, I said something. She's like, wow, like, where did you learn that? Like, how do you acquire this knowledge? And I said, well, I learned that one in class like last week, because so and so was talking about it. And they're like, oh, well, I didn't, I wasn't paying attention. So it's kind of interesting that not everybody can learn like that just by, being told. But for me, it does. So that factors back into the whole, language thing. It's just I notice when people are saying things, I like to think. And, it's a bad habit, but I do eavesdrop. And it's not like I just find myself naturally doing it. Like if I'll be sitting at one desk and then, the desk like behind me and off to the side are talking about something, like I can usually pick that up, and I don't know, I just study how people react, which you think my dialogue in books would be better, but it isn't. And that's something I'm working on. To me, it's not much how people speak as in what they're doing and how they formulate their actions. So yeah, if you ignore everything I just said for the whole length of this blog, you can just put it down as I study words, spoken, written, and thought. And that's how I can rant on for an audio blog. Question number 2 was, why don't you have a better ending, like tagline for your audio blog? And that wasn't so much a question as a comment that you should do this, and I was like, I'll politely decline because I'm trying to be, professional. But why can I never end anything? I also have this problem when writing. I usually find if you listen to previous blogs where I never want the story to end, it kind of the same thing happens as I don't actually want to stop writing. I just want to keep going. So I really have trouble ending it. That also comes in from the whole eavesdropping aspect, that you never just hear a full conversation. There's never really a conclusion to it. And even with my conversations with people, I don't know. I'm not capable of ending it. I don't know. I want it to keep on going. I'm probably a little bit OCD in that way. So I find usually an abrupt end is kind of is final. Like it's done. It's over. I never know that. I can't figure out that soft and gentle ending, or I have to leave it, completely open-ended, like the end of The Guardian is fairly open-ended. I still don't like how that ended, but it's not that I don't like it. It's just something about it doesn't feel right, and maybe one day I'll figure that out, and maybe one day I won't, but that is yet to be seen. Maybe I should get a pen for this and try and write out a great tagline, but they never come out saying exactly what I want to say. Like everybody else has this cool slogan, like there can only be one, or keep fit and have fun, and stuff like that, which respectively was Highlander and Body Break, which, oh, good old 90s television. So I really don't know. I guess I'll just keep working on it. I'm still young, and I hope I have a long life ahead of me, and I've only just completed my first book. We'll talk after I've finished 50 of them if I can. I'm currently writing 9 different books, and 2 of those are the first drafts to a series that I can foresee having 6 or 7 books in them each. So I've got enough material to keep me busy for probably the next decade or 2. And I just keep coming up with random story ideas. As one of my fellow classmates could point out, we were sitting kind of in a bit of a lecture, and I just started scrawling on this piece of paper, and then I showed it to him, and it was a book idea, and I actually offered it to him because I was just like, man, I already have enough books. This one, probably by the time I get done the ones that I want to do, I'll have lost the motivation to do this one. So yeah, long story short, I don't want things to end, so I don't know, goodbyes are they're too goodbye-ish. Some people have the policy, they always say, oh, tell the person that you love them, in goodbye, just in case you don't make it back, so, they'll know that you actually love them. But the whole journey that you two had together should state whether or not you love them, and if, you don't make it back, I hope that they feel, that they were always loved. So, I don't know, I guess a lot of people put significance on the ending, and I put more significance on the telling and the messages and morals learned within. Wow, that actually sounded really good. I'm kind of impressed with myself there. I didn't actually... I knew that instinctively, I think, but I had trouble finding the language for it. So now we finally come to the end of this blog. I think I came up with a new tagline. Join me next time in further exploration of writing. No, that actually sounded really bad. So I'll just stick to the good old, I'm done. Goodbye.